Hello, I'm injury attorney Stacey Barrus, and I get asked a lot of questions about injury cases. We have people that call a lot. And so today I want to talk about a question that we've been getting a lot of calls about, and that is, what type of insurance coverage should people have in Texas? As it turns out, many times people are involved in an accident or in a car wreck, and then they realize after the fact that they don't have the insurance that they should have. So I wanted to address a few of my tips and pointers that I give to my clients with regard to insurance coverage. First, I want to talk a little bit about uninsured motorist, what that is, what it means, and why you should have it. I want to talk also about personal injury protection, and then also having adequate coverage limits. That is, having enough to really protect you and your family. Everyone's needs are different, but generally speaking, the adequate coverage limit is something that you can figure out if you have enough or if you don't. So, first off, with uninsured motorists, well, you should know Texas has one of the highest rates of uninsured drivers in the country. And in fact, within Texas, San Antonio and southward have some of the highest rates of uninsured drivers in the state of Texas, which means that your odds of getting hit by someone without insurance in the state of Texas is pretty good. In fact, I always tell people it's not if you get hit by an uninsured driver, but when. So uninsured motorist coverage is something that I highly recommend. And surprisingly to most people, you can add that coverage to your existing liability policy without much added expense. It really isn't all that expensive. Okay, so I recommend getting that. Uninsured motorist coverage, underinsured motorist coverage, they go hand in hand. You definitely need that if you're going to be driving in the state of Texas. The second tip is for personal injury protection, or sometimes called PIP for short. That's PIP. And a lot of times people wonder, well, what is PIP? What I recommend with PIP is to always have PIP along with your uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage, because personal injury protection protects you with two things. Number one, it can help pay medical bills, and number two, it can help pay lost wages. Personal injury protection, or PIP, is first party coverage. That means it's coverage that your own insurance company provides to you and that you actually pay for. It's in addition to your other policy, and you're going to pay for that a little bit extra. Not a lot extra, but a little bit extra. And that's why it's called first party. It's not relying on the insurance of the other driver, but rather on your own insurance policy. And I recommend with PIP to get the most that you can afford. Sometimes the insurance company will also offer you MedPay, and I recommend maxing out your PIP coverage before you get MedPay. Okay? MedPay really, I don't recommend getting that unless you've maxed out your PIP. If you have the PIP at the highest limits you can get and you want to add a little bit extra coverage, then maybe add some MedPay on there. But if you had to choose one or the other, I would say definitely choose PIP protection over MedPay for a couple of reasons. Clients are often alarmed to learn that MedPay really is just a loan, and it's a loan that they pay for. You pay for it on your policy to have it, but the reason I say it's a loan is that if you're involved in an accident, you have medical bills, and if your insurance company pays those medical bills, if you get a settlement from the at-fault driver's insurance policy, you have to repay back to your own insurance company the amount that they paid under MedPay coverage. With PIP protection, you do not have to pay that back. Okay, you get that payment. Let's say you have a $10,000 PIP policy on your plan, and you have $10,000 in medical bills that you submit to them. Your insurance company pays you the $10,000 under your PIP coverage. If you get a settlement from the at-fault driver, you do not have to pay that $10,000 back. If you had MedPay, you would have to pay MedPay back. That's why I say always get PIP first, and I prefer it over MedPay. I think it's smarter because it covers both medical expenses and it covers lost wages as well. You don't have to pay it back. MedPay only is applicable to medical bills, does not cover lost wages, and it has to be paid back. So if you're wondering what to add, forego MedPay, I would recommend, and just get the most PIP you can afford, okay? One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that a couple things about PIP and making a claim on your own insurance. Number one, Texas state law requires that they must offer you personal injury protection. And if you reject it, you must be rejected in writing. That is, you have to have a signature showing that you rejected it. Okay. The second thing that people don't understand about PIP coverage in making a claim against your own insurance, making a claim against your PIP coverage, is that the insurance company cannot raise your rates for making a claim. A lot of times clients say, well, I don't want to file that under my own insurance. Well, if you have PIP protection, you've been paying for that. I tell people that's kind of like buying a lottery ticket, having the winning number but not wanting to cash it in. Doesn't make any sense. PIP, your insurance company cannot raise your rates for making a PIP claim. That's against the law. So you're paying for this coverage. If you get in an accident and you have PIP coverage, you should definitely make a claim against the PIP coverage so that you can get that extra money to help you and your family out. Coverage limits. A lot of times with coverage limits, people just don't know quite how to gauge what kind of coverage they need. One thing they're always surprised at, though, is when I show them that for a negligible amount, you could really increase your coverage beyond the minimum requirements. So if you want uninsured, underinsured motorists, which I highly recommend, then don't just get the minimums. Check and see what you and your family really need. What kind of, if you have a lot of money in savings and you can afford to, be out of work for 4 to 5, 6 months and be okay, then maybe you forego it. I highly recommend getting it though, because for the amount that it's going to cost you additionally each month, it provides you protection that you'll need. So I tell people, don't just get the minimum limits. Check into it. You'll be surprised. I had a client one time that had just the minimum limits. After the fact, she called and checked, and she could have gone from $30,000 in coverage up to $300,000 in coverage for less than $10 a month. Okay, that's a lot of additional coverage for not a lot of added investment every month. So highly recommend check to see how much it is to go up in coverage and get the most underinsured, uninsured motorist coverage you can get. Now, it should be said, whatever you want to get in underinsured, uninsured motorist, your liability has to match that too. So you can't just say, I want $30,000 in liability, but I want my uninsured, underinsured motorist to be at $300,000. You can't do that. They have to be the same. But like I said before, for a negligible amount, you can often get a lot more coverage. Sometimes people call in or they go online and they just say, I just want the minimum, because they're looking for what's cheapest, not realizing that for just a small amount more money, they can really go put that money to good use to protecting themselves and their families. One thing I tell people too is that oftentimes insurance agents, I feel, are committing malpractice. And the reason that I say that is that people go into their insurance agents, the insurance agent sells them a policy, but the insurance agent doesn't take a lot of time to explain to them that they could go from $50,000 in coverage to $500,000 in coverage for the price of 2 Starbucks coffees a month, like $10. They don't explain that. Why? Well, I don't think there's really any financial incentive for them to move the client up that coverage. For them simply getting the policy and signing the client up is really what they're looking for. So don't assume automatically, that's my next tip really, is don't assume that you can't afford anything more than the minimum. At that negligible amount, I would say that you can't afford not to have more than the minimum limits. And if there's only one thing I could tell you, one tip, I would tell you, get uninsured motorist protection and get it at the highest limits that you can afford. If you are going to be driving in the state of Texas, you're going to need it. Like I tell people, it's not if you get hit by an uninsured motorist, but when, okay? If you don't have 5 to 6 months worth of savings in the bank to pay all your monthly expenses, and you get hit by an uninsured motorist and have no coverage, and you only carry liability, who's going to pay your bills? Who's going to pay your mortgage or your rent? Who's going to put food on your table, okay? Your family will suffer, and you will suffer. And I hate to see that happen. I see it a lot where people just had the minimum limits. They get hit by an uninsured driver, and they call and want us to help them, and there's really nothing that we can do because there's no insurance. There's nobody to pay the bills because the other driver didn't have insurance. Those few dollars that you're going to pay every single month for the uninsured motorist coverage will go a long way to protecting you and to protecting your family. And I highly recommend it. If I could give one tip, that's what it would be. If you're driving in Texas, you need uninsured motorist coverage, period.